Hey everyone, welcome to the Comic Book Report here. I'm so excited to welcome onto the channel Connor Ratliff and James III. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
On this channel, whenever we do these comic creator interviews, I don't like to bury the lead, so I will go ahead and say what brings you all to my channel today primarily is to talk about your upcoming Stitch series over at Dynamite Entertainment. So without further ado, I'd love to hear, whether from Connor or James, how did this first kind of shoot across the bow? How did this get on the radar? Was this something you requested or something that kind of fell into your guys' laps, so to speak?
It did fall into our lap.
All right.
Yeah.
completely fell into our lap. It's funny you ask if we requested it though, because I had been cold emailing the submissions email address on the Dynamite website for a few months prior, and nothing came of that. And then out of the blue, Connor and I got an email we got a friend of ours connected us to someone at Dynamite who was interested in talking to us, Nathan Cosby, the editor of this. Yeah. And it was complete happenstance. He had been listening to a podcast that Connor and I do called Tiny Dinos, which is about scientists who create dinosaurs very small, and there's a bunch of sci-fi hijinks. And I think he thought that feels good for the world of Stitch that he kind of had in his head at the time. So, the rest, as they say, is history.
Very, very cool. Well, Tiny Dinos even sounds fascinating. I apologize, I'm not overly familiar with that, but
it's not your fault. It is not your fault. It is a fascinating thing because James and I we became friends through doing comedy at Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York, and James and I have had some measure of success doing projects in various forms. We've had the experience of doing a thing and then it blows up into a bigger thing, right? I think that's fair to say, right, James?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
When we started doing the Tiny Dinos podcast, that was an experience where on a creative level, we did 2 seasons of it that we were very happy with. Got a lot of amazing guest stars to do it, but we really couldn't get anyone to listen to it. Like, we couldn't get anyone to review it. We sort of were doing it for a company that stopped making podcasts around the same time that our podcast started. So the infrastructure for promoting it and getting the word out. So we did 2 seasons of the show.
And we lost Connor.
Well,
it's the deep state stopping him from. They don't want this story to get out. I'll tell you that.
Okay, well, hopefully we can get him back online in a minute. Not to pivot too much, James, but this Tiny Dinos podcast, I mean, would you like to fill in the gap a little while we wait for him?
Yeah. I mean, I think where he was going with that was that, we had been doing, it was really this labor of love, and but it was impossible to get over the hump because the infrastructure wasn't there, because the podcast network that we were a part of essentially broke up at the time that we were announced. And so it's this strange thing that happened where what ended up leading to us working together and writing these comics is this kind of small sort of hidden gem that is going to be this, it's this weird footnote kind of to this kind of bigger story.
Okay. I'm on a new device. Apologies. My other device is now uploading what had happened before.
Okay.
This feels like the kind of thing that is thematically ties into both Tiny Dinos and to Stitch, and that it's about technology going wrong. You think you're dealing with one device, and then it does something completely different. So, kind of disaster that is becoming our wheelhouse in terms of the kind of things that James and I work on.
Yeah, if you have us on your show, some technology will break down. That's just our thing. That is just our thing.
Well, I'm happy to get that out of the way in the first 5 minutes then. I think that we're now set. We hit the quota and we're doing good. Welcome back, Connor. by chance, did you want to finish your thought about Tiny Dinos before we kind of
Yeah,
steer?
I tried to fill in some blanks, but I'm sure you were going to say something totally different than what I just
Well, just that
said.
we were very lucky in that Nathan Cosby was one of the few people who somehow discovered our podcast and enjoyed it, and you know, it led us to a place where we're able to work on this very exciting new project, and it is I think an inspirational thing for people that like we were sort of like soldiering on doing this comedy podcast, I think for all the right reasons, because we believed in the idea, we were enjoying making it. And even at the point where it was clear it was not blowing up into a larger thing,
Right.
it led us directly to writing these comics about one of the most popular characters in the world.
Yeah. Right on. Well, obviously, too, like it's a really cool moment for that franchise. You know, the success of the live action Lilo and Stitch film that I know has kind of been going around recently in their theatrical run. I guess for me, and as much as you can speak on, I think that the first issue, does it come out in August for you guys over at Dynamite, or do they know when they're
Yes, I think we're at the time that we are recording this, I think just under a month. I mean, as of right now, the release date is August 13th, and there's obviously been some fluctuation lately with everything going on with
Sure.
distributors, but yeah, but August 13th, I think right now.
Awesome. Okay, well, as much as you can or want to speak to, what do you guys feel like sets apart your Stitch series compared to other entries in the franchise, or even I know that Dynamite just did a Lilo and Stitch run with I think Greg Pak, if I'm not mistaken. Like, there's been a couple bites at the apple, so to speak. But what would you say you guys brought to this franchise?
Yeah, that's a
Well,
great question.
our this being Stitch's first solo series, I mean, Lilo does make some appearances. It's not completely devoid of Lilo content, but we basically we're working with a very specific sort of hook in this series, which is that Jumba, Dr. Jumba Jokiba, is reformed. He's no longer evil, but he still has lingering memberships in various evil organizations like guilds, and he gets his dental coverage through one of them. And so, in order to maintain membership, he has to accrue a certain number of points. So he's still inventing things which could be used for nefarious purposes. So that he has a wiggly tooth that he's worried about. He needs to deal with. And so each issue is sort of Jumba coming up with an invention, with Pleakley sort of as his badgering conscience, trying to keep him on the straight and narrow, and Stitch as this agent of chaos that comes in and inevitably does something to tamper with the device or to uh, mess with it in a way that things very quickly go wrong. In every issue, something goes wrong, and then they're having to deal with the consequences. It's a very specific comedic dynamic that allows us to be very weird and go to some very strange places.
That's awesome. I mean, honestly, like even talking to you guys for less than 10 minutes, like I could tell you guys have a good comedic timing, rapport, everything. And I'm really fascinated to see how that translates to this property because I think that this franchise is so ripe for that. James, do you have anything to add about what you feel like you guys are bringing to Stitch?
Yeah, and I would just say that it's well, to your point of our comedic sensibilities and to Nate's ear listening to Tiny Dinos, really did feel like a fun opportunity for us to play in this way. Like he even said, because of our character dynamics on that podcast, he's like, I'm not asking for Connor to play Jumba and James to play Pleakley, even though if you were to listen to the podcast, that's sort of the roles that we played in. But what was fun about it was kind of having that experience of us working together in that way, and then applying some elements of that to these characters. And then I
Yeah.
would say that like it runs somewhat adjacent to the continuity that we understand in the cartoon. So it's like it doesn't quite fall in any one spot, but you sort of understand who everyone is and like sort of what's going on for all the characters, and it feels very much like each issue resets, like almost literally resets, and we start with a new kind of problem at the top of the next one. It's
Cool.
been a lot of fun to get to just sort of be as weird and different from each episode to episode.
Awesome. Well, I'm honestly excited to check it out. And it's fascinating because I'm sure with the advent of this live action movie and this release coming out, there's probably going to be a whole new wave of fans or interest in a property
Yeah.
like this.
The number of times that I texted Connor during this process, because I think we've been working on it for almost a year now, kind of like being reached out about, and I've the number of times I've texted Connor, I can't believe that we're gonna have a Stitch comic series come out this close to when because there wasn't an announcement. We didn't know exactly when it was going to come out. It all sort of depended on timing and like in our scripts and stuff, but it was seeming like it was gearing to line up sometime around. And and I think with the movie coming out last month or the month before, August is right in the pocket timing wise.
Good catch
So
all.
Really cool.
That's so awesome. Well, I am
And
curious.
All of our stories were, obviously the movie came out this summer. All of our story ideas were pitched, late last year, basically.
Yeah.
So they were
Wow.
done on a completely separate track. It was funny. Our initial meetings where we were, sort of pitching ideas and things, we would get certain rules that it's like, well, please don't do this, and you can't do this, and here's some other things. And most of the rules were all things that were uh, things that wouldn't have even occurred to us to attempt.
Sure, yeah.
Which kind of means that to some extent, everything that we were told we couldn't do or we shouldn't do, for the most part, they were all things that wouldn't have even been on the table. So in a way, it felt like operating with unlimited possibilities.
Right. Yeah.
There were characters. Obviously, there are, just because you're doing a Disney comic doesn't mean like that you can just have Goofy show up on page 3. Like there are
and believe me, we tried. Believe me, we
and but other than that, once we actually settled down to like let's come up with some ideas, it was incredibly freeing to be able to, because I feel like there's a tradition of that in Disney comics, which is that the way that they sort of live in their own universe. That if you were reading the Mickey Mouse newspaper comic in the 1930s, you wouldn't then go see a Mickey Mouse cartoon in the theater and bump on the notion that like, wait a second, this isn't the same. Like each thing had its own independent reality, the same way that when the classic sort of Disney Duck comics of the 1950s and 60s, they're in their own sort of world. And that kind of feels like what we've got here is we have the freedom to sort of make our own version of things that is, recognizable as but even the art style, the art in these issues by very, very talented artists who we've not met. Like obviously James and I are writing these remotely, but we've met, we've been around each other. But Greta Zella does the art for it. We just see the art at the end of the like we write the scripts and then we've seen the first 2 issues, and it's just amazing to see the way that collaboration works, because there are images that we've come up with the idea behind them, but then when you actually see them realized, the style isn't like, it doesn't just look like it's frames from the movie or the TV series. It's very much its own version of how these characters look and what the reality of it works, which is really fun, because I think that also helps when I think of myself as a kid reading certain comics. If something looked different in a comic form than it did in an animated form, that was an immediate signal that it's like, okay, this is this version of that. It's like a different singer singing the same song or something.
Yeah, totally. That's so interesting, and I was curious about you guys because preparing for the interview a little bit, I looked into you guys like a little bit, but it's fascinating to me. I guess you guys have a very broad like career path. It looks like I saw some history in television and different other projects. what made you gravitate for this purpose, obviously, but like what made you gravitate more towards comics as a medium? What's something that, what made you feel like drawn into comics, and what do you think sets comic books apart from perhaps some other writing jobs or gigs you have in other branches of media? Or maybe there are similarities, I'm not sure. Would either of you guys like to speak to that? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, for me specifically, I've always been a fan of comics, and when I, when you get into comedy or when you get into the TV and film industry, there's a lot of times you're like put into a box, like, oh, you do this. This is the thing that you do, and me specifically, my transition started when it was like I started to notice that there were things that I wanted to do that I felt like I was not getting getting the pass to do, wasn't having the options to do some of these things, and particularly like working in genre and I love sci-fi and like superhero stuff and stuff like that, and so I specifically started working in comics for that reason. I wanted to be able to kind of tell stories in those spaces. In
Awesome.
terms of like what I think sets comics apart is I what makes it very different from TV to me, TV and live action stuff to me, is that the imagination and what the artist is able to do is just so different than what you see on screen. Like the camera angles, expressions, all kinds of things break perspectives that you don't typically see in live action TV, especially, or live action film especially. And also comics feels collaborative in a way that you don't always that I don't think you always have in these other mediums, like even from like not just from the writer to the artists to the editors, but also the reader is collaborative in that way because they are bridging the gap from panel to panel and things like that. And so that's those are kind of the top line things for
Yeah.
me in terms of like working in comics that is really moving.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Anything from you, Connor?
Yeah, I mean, when I grew up, I wanted to be a cartoonist, and I did comics when I was in high school for the school paper, and I won some awards for that. But
Wow.
even at that point, I knew that I knew that it wasn't the career path I was looking for in terms of you know uh, uh, when I was very young, I wanted to be an animator, and what ultimately happened at each layer of it was like the more I learned about what an animator did, the less I wanted to do it.
Sure.
And I and the kind of cartoonist that I wanted to be when I was a kid, I just got to a point where I realized like I didn't think I had what it took to be the kind of cartoonist I wanted to be. And so I a lot of the things that I do as an actor and a comedian is sort of scratching a lot of the itches that I was trying to scratch as a cartoonist. But uh, you know, there was this vision that I had of myself, like, what if I got everything I wanted and I had like a nationally syndicated comic strip, and then I found myself 2 years in on a Friday afternoon, not feeling like drawing, my hand hurts, I'm all alone, and I have no idea. And I was
Yeah.
like, I had this vision of that, and I thought, oh, that's a nightmare. This is going to end badly for me. And because I think it is that feeling of certain careers, it's really important that it be all consuming. Someone like, I mean, if I could turn my camera around, all my shelves are comics. Like all my shelves are, Chris Ware and Crazy Cat, and I have a mountain of the complete Peanuts, all of Charles Schultz's strips.
Wow.
Someone like
Yeah.
Charles Schultz that for 50 years did this thing every day, no assistant, just he drew it, he wrote it, and the second he stopped, he died. It was just like this was this guy's
Yeah.
passion. And I felt like, no, I want to try that in different ways. There's other ways that I think are more appropriate for my abilities. And I always have admired people who are pure cartoonists, able to just like
Yeah.
have an idea and they write it and they draw it. Sometimes there's this incredible guilt. Someone will work on a graphic novel for 10 years, and you'll
Hmm.
wait for it, and you buy it and you read it in an afternoon. You whiz through it, and you're like, oh no, like They spent a decade on this, and I read it in an hour.
Yeah.
And but I'm such an admirer of the people who can really do this, and to be able to be a part of a team that's collaborating to make these things. I just feel really lucky to have landed here especially through such an indirect
Right.
route, because even especially as someone who I grew up and Disney comics were the main comics that I was obsessed with. I wanted anything that was inspired by Carl Barks, who created Uncle Scrooge and all the comics that were the inspiration for DuckTales.
Yeah.
Um, and that's ultimately every time we write one of these things, that's always sort of my home base in terms of what I have in my mind in terms of what kind of comic is this. And I'm like, oh, it's exactly the kind of comics that I would have liked reading almost at any age when I was growing up, And I still like reading.
I love hearing that. Honestly, that's like you're the right person for the job. Like hearing that, like that's amazing. Um, cool. Well, I want to make sure we touch on a couple other things. I know that you guys, like we've just established, you guys have a ton of projects going on right now. I know we spoke a little bit offline, but I'd like to kind of bring attention. Maybe we could do James first. I know you're doing a one shot Powerpuff Girls Supervillain Summer Spectacular. What can you speak to about that?
Yes. So I think that'll be out shortly. I'm not sure when this will air, but at the time of this recording, in a week or two, it should be out. But it's the summer one shot for Powerpuff this year, and I pitched a bunch of different ideas to Nate that could sort of exist in the Powerpuff universe. But what really excited me most about them is their kind of rogues gallery of villains. And so and then just thinking that they're just this staple of Townsville. Townsville just has, like all of these different cartoonish levels of villainry. And I just sort of was thinking of what would be summary and what two things could I put together. An amusement park. What would happen if the villains are at the amusement park, and what does that mean? Are they just trying to have a good time, or is there something nefarious afoot? And so it's essentially just the Powerpuff Girls trying to have a good time at their amusement park during Villains Day, a day that is free for villains to come to the park. And there is either a mystery underneath it, or it's fine, or it's fine. And it's them sort of kind of trying to figure out, get to the bottom of that. I had an absolute blast working on it. I was a huge Powerpuff fan growing up, and so it was great to get to go back to. I went back to the first short and watched as much as I could to get inspiration for it.
Awesome. Very cool. And that's also through Dynamite, right?
Also through Dynamite. That's right.
Excellent. Yes, we gotta love it. Cool. And then, well, I'm looking forward to seeing more about that. That sounds hysterical. I know I grew up. I'm a '90s kid. I remember when Powerpuff Girls was just everywhere, and that
Yeah.
was a really entertaining property. Like my brother and I, like we don't have a sister, but we still watched it. We were tuned in. It was engaging. It was superheroes.
Yeah.
It was colorful. The whole deal.
I only just found out that when it first aired, I guess boys weren't into it. And I'm like, what do you mean? I remember when it first aired. I remember when it
That's
first
what I'm
aired. And I
saying.
remember losing my mind.
Yeah.
I lost my mind. I went to school. My friends and I, my guy friends and I, we were doing the voices and doing all the things. Like, it was like, what do you mean? Boys like Pop-Up Girls. I need to quit.
I mean, I was in that camp. I still think it's an engaging show, man. Cool. And then transitioning over to Connor. Connor, you have a really unique project that I know you wanted to promote as well. That I'd be happy to kind of give a little stage to here with a YouTube channel. It sounds like.
Yeah, I've been for the past a little over a year. I've been doing this show called Connor Ratliff Presents the Acting Class, and it's a one-person improvised show that pretends to be a real acting class. Although I've started incorporating guests into it, which kind of makes it a little bit like the old Inside the Actor Studio type show, except I make the guest improvise with me. So we actually have to do some real acting during the show. But
Amazing.
I've been touring around with it and putting the shows on the YouTube channel so people can see them. And it's been really fun because, I've been doing improv in New York for about 15 years. And I was doing a show I do called the George Lucas Talk Show. And we're doing this play that we created. We were doing it at the Edinburgh Fringe. And we had a venue for like 3 extra dates. And the other actor in the show couldn't be there. And I didn't want to give up the venue. So I said, I'll just do the George Lucas Talk Show is a talk show where I pretend to be retired filmmaker George Lucas. And we had 3 extra days in this slot. And I said, I'll just do George Prov. I'll just do one person improv as George Lucas. And I'd never done one prov before. I'd seen a few other improvisers do it. It's not the most common form because usually improv is a collaboration. It's usually a thing where you have other people that you're creating this thing with.
Right.
And I really liked it, but I didn't want to keep. I thought I don't need another show where I spray my hair gray and pretend to be George Lucas. But I really liked the form of just being alone on stage. It's very vulnerable, but it's also you're very vulnerable, but you're also in complete control. You have no one else to blame, but you also can do whatever you want. Like it is one of those things where when you're doing improv, you have no one is to blame for the show except the people on stage.
Right.
You can do anything you want. Sometimes when I've coached people doing improv, I've said sometimes people do improv as if they're in a low budget movie. I'm like, you can do anything. Your improv show can have $1 billion imaginary budget. You can do
Yeah.
any kind of thing you want. So I'm trying to explore that and expand it. And really, every show is completely different. Every show I sort of discover something new that's possible. Sort of a mixture. When it's just me, it's sort of a mixture of crowd work and scene work
Wow.
because I don't know what the show's going to be until I talk to who's in the audience or I talk to who the guest is. And so the results, it's always a dangerous thing to even promise to put improv online because it inherently loses something in the
Sure.
translation just from being in the room. Uh, and also from being done. When you're in a room with an improv show, anything can happen. Once it's done, it's happened.
I imagine
But
there's
people
been like
people have
a
been checking it
live.
out, and I encourage people to subscribe. Connor Ratliff presents the acting class on YouTube.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Connor. And thank you, James. Honestly, before we land the plane, I have 2 questions for you guys that I try to ask a lot of my guests on this channel, if you don't mind. The first one being, and it doesn't have to be comics. You can certainly pick comics you've worked on or are attached to, but it can be anything in your body of work, especially with careers as dynamic as your guys is. Um, what would you guys consider like a quintessential creative work from you guys that you would want to point to anyone who, after seeing this interview, might want to check you guys out a little more beyond Stitch and some of these other projects? What is like a definitive James III or Connor Ratliff project, creative work that you say, hey, this is a great one I'd point to if you want to see a little bit more about my vibe, what I can offer, or something I may be particularly proud of?
Wow, that's impossible. Can I say 2 things? Can I
Of
say 2
course.
things? Okay.
Oh no, he took my thing.
Limited imaginary budget. Just do whatever. Go for it.
Okay, you should check out Astronomy Club on Netflix. Me and a few comedy friends of mine, we have a show on Netflix. It's 1 season of a sketch show that we had been doing improv and sketch together at the UCB Theater in New York. And this is sort of the culmination of that work. We had been there for a few years. That's a great show. Check it out. You will get it's not just me, but you will get the true sense of how I am comedically, and also the stuff that the group put together. And then I would say my comic series Junior. It's you can go to ruleof3inc.com to read that, but that is it's inspired by a personal story, but it takes it to supernatural lengths, and it's sort of like a supernatural dark comedy set in the afterlife. And I think that those 2 things, that's most who I am, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and when I was saying before about how James and I have each had our individual experiences with doing a project and it blows up big, I always I think when you think about the history of sketch comedy and sketch groups,
Mhm.
the sort of the pinnacle, sort of the highest height that a sketch comedy group can achieve is to have a sketch comedy TV series. And because you think about, like, when you think of the history of sketch comedy, and you think of whether it's Saturday Night Live or Monty Python's Flying Circus or Mr. Show
Yeah.
or In Living Color or SCTV, like sketch groups getting a TV show, that's the thing, even more so than movies to some extent. Like the thing that is pure like sketch. There's a few examples, obviously the Monty Python movies, but to have watched Astronomy Club at UCB doing both improv and sketch,
Mhm.
the fact that they have a Netflix sketch comedy TV series, it really is like, in a world where comedy doesn't necessarily get all the trophies and awards that other things get, in sketch comedy, I think that's sort of the peak. That's sort of as
Yeah.
pretty much as high as
Yeah.
you can go. So everybody should check that out.
Yes, for as long as it's on there, you never know with the digital sphere, how long things are going to be around. So
Thank
while it
God
is
it
there,
wasn't a
please check it
Bandersnatch.
out.
Thank God you didn't do one of those like interactive things
Yeah, yeah,
that they just pulled because they stopped doing interactive stuff.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
but check it out, and if it ever goes away, then go to the the underground to find it. Um, for me, it would probably be my podcast Dead Eyes. It's the a few years ago I did this podcast that is a nonfiction comedic investigative series, and it is about the true thing that happened to me, which is when I was in my early 20s, just out of drama school. I booked a small role in the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers the day before I was supposed to film my scene. I was called in because the director of my episode, Tom Hanks, had looked at my audition tape and was having second thoughts. I was told I had to go and re-audition for him in person because he looked at my tape and he thought I had dead eyes. And so I re-auditioned for Tom Hanks. I was fired immediately and sent into an emotional tailspin, quit acting for a while. Anyway, in 2020, I made this podcast, which treated the event as if it was like a true crime saga, where
Oh
I
my
try to get to the bottom of what really happened. Did I really have dead eyes on that tape, etc.? You can follow. I think it's a pretty breezy listen. It goes in on a bunch of different tangents,
yeah.
but it does eventually lead to some satisfying outcomes. So that's
Wow.
Dead Eye. That's the podcast, and it
Woo.
probably explains everything you need to know about me.
Well, sorry about that, but also I am fascinated. I'm gonna have to look into that.
It's incredible. It is an incredible listen, and if you are interested in acting and in that world, it's extremely informative of what the highs and the lows are like, and then it's also just in general an incredible experiment to listen to.
Wow. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for those recommendations. And the final question before I let you guys go today: this is a comic book channel, and I have to ask my guests, especially creators like yourselves, you both mentioned enjoying this medium. So my question to you is not your own work or the work of the other guest on this little episode here. But what are some comics that are on your short list of go to recommend? Maybe from your own personal hit list. Maybe not everyone would recommend, but this is like a gem for you that you'd be like, more people need to check this out. What would be on that list for you? It could be one book, it could be like a short handful.
Yeah, I one of my main go-tos is Bitterroot.
Mm.
I really enjoyed that series. It just recently, I think they're on issue 4 now of the relaunch. It's incredible. It follows like a family of ghost hunters during the Harlem Renaissance.
Whoa.
And the ghosts and monsters are sort of a representation of racism at the time. And especially like if you liked Sinners, you're gonna enjoy reading Bitterroot. And then there's a handful of time travel things, and I'm trying to think of which one I want to say. I'd say check out there's this sort of like lasting battle between good and evil called Vicious Circle. It came out with Boom. Came out under Boom Studios a couple years ago. Three issues, really incredible art. So yeah, I would check that one out as well.
Awesome, thanks.
Boy, it's hard for me to decide because there's it's one of those. It's like when someone says, "What's your favorite movie?" and you're like, "I like all movies." Your brain immediately goes blank. One, I'll mention a publisher first, just because I just ordered a damaged copy of a book from. There's a publisher called Sunday Press Books. This editor named Peter Morescu makes these gigantic books, often just like reprints of comics from sometimes 100 years ago.
Wow.
But they're these big, giant books that, like, the books themselves are sometimes like $60 or $100, but they're the type of thing that you like save up for, and then you get the book, you don't know where to put it, you don't know where to read it, but it's so
like
big.
Where does this go?
When you do find oftentimes you'll find a place where you'll think like that's not where books go, but it's where like structurally it's helpful to have.
What do you do when a coffee table book is the size of the coffee table? Like what do you do there?
But when you do find a place and the time to read, it makes you feel like a little kid again, because suddenly your relationship to the book as a physical object is like when you were 5 and a big book felt like it would fill the whole room.
Wow.
Also, I'll mention a cartoonist named Walter Scott, who does these books about Wendy, this character named Wendy, and I find these books to be very, very funny, and I enjoy reading them a lot. They're from Drawn and Quarterly.
Wow. Awesome. Okay, gentlemen. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. Just to recap, don't miss out on the upcoming Stitch series by these guys here over at Dynamite. Don't miss out on the Summer Spectacular for Powerpuff Girls. Don't miss out on that incredible YouTube channel. Huge thank you to those at Dynamite for setting up this interview. And again, guys, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching The Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, a comment, and check out another video on your way out. Thanks, bye.